What if I told you that the hardest money you will ever make is not your first million, not even your first $100,000, but your first 20,000? In a world obsessed with overnight success and viral wealth stories, this number quietly separates people who stay stuck from those who build unstoppable momentum. Before $20,000, you were pushing a heavy boulder uphill. Every dollar saved feels slow. Every investment return feels disappointing. You work harder, cut expenses, stay disciplined, yet nothing seems to change. After $20,000, something shifts. The boulder starts rolling on its own. This video is about that shift. Today, you will understand why your first $20,000 changes everything. Not because it makes you rich, but because it proves a system works. You will see why most people quit right before this turning point and how reaching it rewires the way you think about money forever. This is not hype. It is math, psychology, and behavior working together. Here's why this matters. Once you cross this milestone, wealth stops feeling like a dream and starts feeling inevitable. If you've ever felt frustrated watching small returns, doubted whether investing was even worth it, or wondered why progress feels invisible despite your effort, this video will connect the dots. Because the goal is not to get rich fast. The goal is to reach the point where quitting no longer makes sense.
Most people do not fail with money because they are lazy or unintelligent. They fail because the system feels broken from the very beginning. You work, you get paid, you pay bills, and whatever is left feels too small to matter. Saving feels like sacrifice with no visible reward. Investing feels like planting seeds in concrete. You put in effort, but the feedback is discouraging. This is where most people get stuck. They open an investment account, deposit a few $100s, maybe a few thousand if they're disciplined, and then they wait. Weeks pass, months pass. The balance barely moves. Sometimes it even goes down. At this point, doubt creeps in. They start asking dangerous questions. Is this even worth it? Am I doing something wrong? Are investments only for people who already have money? So they stop. Not dramatically, quietly. They skip one contribution, then another. Eventually, the habit disappears, and the account sits untouched. This is not a motivation problem. It is a perception problem. The early stage of wealth building offers almost no emotional reward. Your effort is real, but the results are invisible. The pain of saving is immediate, while the benefit feels distant and uncertain. Meanwhile, life keeps happening. Rent goes up, groceries cost more, and unexpected expense wipes out months of discipline in seconds. So people do what feels logical. They focus on surviving today instead of building tomorrow. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The system is not designed to encourage beginners. It rewards patience, scale, and time, not enthusiasm. That is why the majority of people never escape financial stagnation, not because they lack opportunity, but because the beginning feels like running on a treadmill that never speeds up. Unless you understand this phase, it will convince you to quit before anything meaningful has a chance to happen. This stage creates a dangerous illusion that effort does not matter. When progress is slow, the brain interprets it as failure. But in reality, this phase is simply the cost of entry. Everyone who eventually builds wealth passes through this exact valley. The difference is not who struggles, but who understands that this struggle is temporary and refuses to interpret silence as a signal to stop. Without this awareness, frustration becomes identity and stagnation feels permanent. That is the hidden trap almost nobody warns you about at the start, early on.
To understand why the beginning feels so discouraging, you have to understand the math behind it. At low balances, money simply does not move fast enough to feel meaningful. If you invest $1,000 and earn a solid 10% in a year, that is $100. Even $5,000 becomes only $500. On paper, the return is correct. Emotionally, it feels irrelevant. This is where many people misinterpret reality. They assume the problem is the investment, the market, or their strategy. In truth, the problem is scale. Compounding works exponentially, but it starts painfully slow. In the early stage, your portfolio does not grow because of returns, it grows because of contributions. Your discipline matters more than performance, your behavior matters more than market conditions. This is why the beginning feels unfair. You are doing everything right, but the reward system has not activated yet. The brain expects progress to be proportional to effort, but compounding does not work that way. It delays gratification aggressively. At this stage, time is working against your emotions, not your money. Every contribution feels heavy, every market dip feels personal, every flat month feels like proof that nothing is happening. But something is happening. What you are really building in this phase is not wealth, you are building the base that allows wealth to exist later. Compounding does not reward small numbers, it rewards consistency applied over time. Think of it like heating water. You can apply heat for a long time and see no visible change. Then suddenly, it boils. The energy was never wasted, it was accumulating invisibly. The same thing happens with money. This is why the early phase filters people out, not because it is ineffective, but because it is emotionally quiet. There is no excitement, no validation, no dramatic progress, only repetition. Understanding this changes everything. Once you stop expecting early returns to change your life, you stop feeling disappointed. You stop reacting emotionally to short-term results. You stop questioning the process. And when you stop questioning, you stop quitting. This is the moment where discipline becomes sustainable, because now you know the truth. The beginning is not designed to reward you. It is designed to test whether you understand what you are building. And that understanding is what allows you to keep going long enough to reach the point where the math finally starts working in your favor.
Now that you understand why the beginning feels slow and unrewarding, it is time to introduce the idea that changes how you see progress entirely, the $20,000 rule. This number is not magic, it is not a guarantee, and it does not make anyone rich. What it does is mark the point where the system finally becomes visible. Before $20,000, your results are dominated by effort. After it, results begin to reflect structure. This is the moment where compounding stops being theoretical and starts becoming observable. At $20,000, a normal market return finally produces numbers your brain can register as meaningful. A 10% return is no longer a few frustrating dollars, it is thousands. Enough to notice, enough to feel real. That visibility matters more than most people realize. Human behavior changes when feedback becomes clear. When progress can be seen, measured, and felt, discipline stops relying on willpower, it becomes self-reinforcing. This is why $20,000 acts as a psychological threshold. Below it, investing feels like faith. Above it, investing feels like confirmation. You stop asking whether the system works and start asking how to optimize it. You stop chasing shortcuts because you no longer need hope, you have evidence. This is also where patience begins to replace urgency. When progress becomes measurable, you are no longer tempted by risky bets or unrealistic timelines. The long term finally feels trustworthy. That is the real power of this milestone. The rule is not about the number itself, it is about what the number represents. The transition from invisible progress to visible momentum. Once you cross this line, the game changes, not overnight and not dramatically, but permanently. And that is why understanding this concept early prevents one of the most common mistakes in personal finance, quitting right before the process becomes obvious. Once you pass the $20,000 mark, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The money starts moving without you pushing it as hard. Before this point, progress depended almost entirely on your actions. Your deposits mattered more than your returns. Miss a contribution, and growth stalled. Everything felt fragile. After 20,000, growth becomes sturdier. Now, when the market has a normal year, your portfolio produces gains that are no longer symbolic. A 10% return means $2,000. In a strong year, it could be more. That is real money, enough to cover bills, fund new investments, or simply reinforce that something is finally working. This is where momentum is born. Momentum does not mean you stop contributing. It means your effort is no longer working alone. Your money has joined the process. Each dollar you already invested begins amplifying every new dollar you add. This creates a compounding effect, not just financially, but behaviorally. When people see progress, they protect it. They become more consistent. They're less tempted to pull money out during market downturns because they now understand the scale of what they're building. You also begin to experience time differently. Before, a year felt like nothing changed. After this point, a year feels like progress. You can look back and clearly see movement. That clarity builds confidence. This is why people who reach this stage often say that investing suddenly feels easier, even though nothing about the strategy changed. The difficulty was never the process, it was the lack of feedback. At this level, mistakes hurt less and patience becomes natural. A market dip no longer feels like failure, it feels like volatility within a system that is already working. This is the first moment where wealth building stops feeling hypothetical. You are no longer imagining future success, you are watching a machine operate in real time, and that is dangerous in the best possible way. Because once you experience money growing without direct effort, your relationship with time, spending, and risk shifts permanently. You stop asking how fast you can get rich and start asking how strong you can make the system. This is the moment when discipline turns into identity. Not because you're rich, but because you finally see proof that staying consistent changes outcomes. The most powerful change after reaching $20,000 has nothing to do with money. It happens in your head. Before this point, every financial decision feels heavy. You question yourself constantly. You wonder if you started too late, if you chose the wrong strategy, or if other people simply know something you do not. Doubt is the default state. After 20,000, that doubt begins to fade, not because you suddenly became an expert, but because you now have proof. You have evidence that consistent behavior produces results. The system is no longer theoretical, it is personal. This shifts how you think about risk. Before, market fluctuations feel threatening because your progress feels fragile. A small loss feels like a step backward. After this milestone, volatility becomes easier to tolerate. You understand that movement is part of growth, not a sign of failure. You also stop chasing shortcuts. When you have no confirmation that the process works, it is tempting to look for faster paths. Hype, speculation, and risky bets feel attractive because they promise validation. Once you cross this threshold, patience becomes logical. You no longer need hope, you have momentum. This is where discipline stops being something you force and starts becoming something you protect. You begin thinking in years instead of weeks. Decisions become calmer. Emotional reactions soften. The urge to constantly check balances fades because you trust the trajectory. This psychological shift is what allows people to scale. Without it, higher balances would actually increase anxiety. With it, growth feels manageable. This is why many people who reach this stage describe a sense of quiet confidence, not excitement, not euphoria, stability. They stop comparing themselves to others because their progress is now internal. They know exactly what they are building and why. This change cannot be rushed. It cannot be faked. It only comes from staying in the process long enough to see it respond. And once it happens, your relationship with money becomes fundamentally different. You stop reacting and start steering. You stop hoping and start planning. This is the moment when wealth building becomes sustainable, not because the numbers are large, but because your mindset is finally aligned with the timeline required for long-term success. To fully understand the importance of this milestone, it helps to compare life on both sides of it. Before $20,000, everything feels uncertain. Decisions are reactive. You hesitate before investing more because every dollar feels irreplaceable. Spending triggers guilt.
Market drops trigger fear. Progress feels fragile and easily reversible. Your focus is survival. You watch your balance closely, looking for signs that you're doing something wrong. Every fluctuation feels personal, as if the market is judging your choices. Time feels slow, and the future feels abstract. After $20,000, the same actions produce very different emotions. Investing feels normal, not stressful. Market dips no longer feel like threats to your identity. They're just part of the process. You stop checking balances obsessively because you understand direction matters more than daily movement. Your focus shifts from survival to construction. Before, your question was, is this even working? After, it becomes, how do I strengthen this? You begin optimizing instead of questioning. You think about contribution rates, diversification, and long-term strategy rather than short-term results. This is also where patience becomes practical. Before this milestone, patience feels like a personality trait you either have or do not have. After it, patience is reinforced by evidence. You have seen time do its job. Perhaps most importantly, your relationship with yourself changes. Before, you feel behind. You compare your progress to others and assume you missed something. After, comparison loses power. You know where you are, where you are going, and how long it will take. This is the quiet transformation most people never talk about. Crossing $20,000 does not make you wealthy, but it moves you into a different category of thinker. You are no longer guessing, you are executing. And once you experience this shift, going back to old habits feels unnatural. Not because you were disciplined, but because you have crossed a mental line. This is why people who reach this stage rarely stop completely. The identity change is already in motion.
If reaching $20,000 is such a powerful turning point, the obvious question is, why do so few people ever get there? The answer is not lack of opportunity, it is behavior. The first reason is quitting too early. Most people leave the process during the most deceptive phase, when effort is high and feedback is low. They assume slow progress means failure, not realizing that this stage is universal. They stop right before momentum has a chance to appear. The second reason is chasing speed. Instead of accepting a gradual path, many people look for shortcuts. They jump between strategies, follow hype, or take unnecessary risks, hoping to skip the boring parts. Ironically, this often resets their progress back to zero. The third reason is underestimating consistency. People overestimate what they can do in a month and underestimate what they can do in 5 years. Small, repeated actions feel insignificant, so they're easily abandoned. But this is exactly how the first 20,000 is built. There is also a deeper issue most people never address. Many subconsciously believe that slow progress is a sign they are not meant to succeed financially. This belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When results do not come quickly, they disengage emotionally and stop showing up consistently. The environment reinforces this mindset. Social media celebrates extremes. Overnight success stories get attention. Slow, disciplined progress does not. So people feel behind when they're doing exactly what works. This creates a dangerous pattern. People compare their early chapters to someone else's middle. The comparison creates impatience, and impatience leads to abandonment. The truth is simple, but uncomfortable. The path to the first $20,000 is not impressive, it is repetitive, it is quiet, and it offers very little external validation. But that is precisely why it works. Those who reach this milestone are not more talented, they're simply willing to continue when there is no applause. They stay when nothing seems to be happening. And because of that, they eventually reach the stage where everything changes, not because they found a secret, but because they did not leave the process before it had time to reveal itself.
Now that you understand why this milestone matters and why most people never reach it, the next question becomes practical. How do you actually build your first $20,000? The answer is simpler than most expect, but not easier. The first principle is automation. Relying on motivation is unreliable. Instead, contributions must happen automatically before money has a chance to be spent elsewhere. Even small amounts, when automated, remove decision fatigue and turn progress into default behavior. The second principle is prioritizing income before complexity. At this stage, increasing income often matters more than optimizing returns. Chasing higher yields adds noise and risk, while earning a little more and investing consistently accelerates progress in a predictable way. The third principle is eliminating financial leaks. High-interest debt, impulsive spending, and lifestyle inflation silently slow momentum. Every dollar lost here delays the milestone. The goal is not extreme frugality, but intentional spending aligned with long-term objectives. Next comes simplicity in investing. Boring, diversified, long-term assets outperform emotional decisions over time. The objective is not to beat the market, but to stay invested long enough for the market to do its job. Consistency is the final and most important rule. Progress is built through repetition, not intensity. One strong month followed by inaction does nothing. Moderate contributions, repeated relentlessly, create results that feel surprising only to those who underestimate time. It is also critical to measure progress correctly. Instead of focusing on daily balances, track contribution streaks, months invested, and annual growth. This shifts attention from outcomes you cannot control to behaviors you can. There will be periods where nothing exciting happens. Markets will move sideways. Life will interrupt plans. Motivation will fluctuate. This is normal, not a sign to change strategy. The purpose of this phase is not speed, it is resilience. You are building a system strong enough to survive boredom, volatility, and distraction. Once that system exists, reaching $20,000 becomes a matter of time, not talent. This is why the plan works. It does not depend on perfect timing, exceptional intelligence, or luck. It depends on structure, patience, and repetition. And when those are in place, the first $20,000 stops feeling like a distant dream and starts feeling like an approaching checkpoint. One that once crossed changes how the rest of the journey unfolds. Reaching $20,000 does not mean the journey is over. It means the journey finally becomes clearer. After this point, progress starts to feel more predictable. You are no longer guessing whether the system works. You are observing how it works. Growth becomes something you can project instead of hope for. This is where future milestones begin to form naturally. $50,000 no longer feels abstract. $100,000 becomes imaginable, not because the numbers are easy, but because the path is familiar. You have already proven that you can stay consistent long enough to reach a meaningful goal. At this stage, compounding begins to stack. Your contributions still matter, but returns start playing a larger role each year. The balance grows from both directions, and time becomes a visible ally instead of a silent one. Decision-making also improves. With more capital and more confidence, you can think strategically. Diversification makes sense. Long-term planning becomes realistic. You stop reacting to headlines and start focusing on fundamentals. Perhaps the most important change is emotional stability. Before, progress felt fragile. After this milestone, setbacks feel temporary. You understand that volatility is part of the process, not a personal failure. This reduces stress and increases clarity. You also gain patience with yourself. You stop rushing the timeline. You stop expecting linear growth. You respect the rhythm of compounding because you have experienced it firsthand. This is why many people describe everything after 20,000 as easier, even though the effort remains. The difficulty was never the work, it was the uncertainty. Once uncertainty disappears, consistency becomes natural. The system is no longer something you are trying to believe in. It is something you are actively watching grow. And from this point forward, wealth building stops feeling like a question mark and starts feeling like a long-term equation you already know how to solve. At this stage, it becomes clear that wealth is not built by speed, intensity, or short bursts of effort. It is built by staying in the game longer than most people are willing to. The problem is that modern culture rewards urgency. Everything pushes you to move faster, earn faster, grow faster. And when progress does not match that pace, frustration sets in. But money does not respond to pressure. It responds to time. The people who eventually win are not the ones who sprint. They're the ones who keep showing up when progress feels boring, when results feel slow, and when no one is watching. This is where patience stops being passive and becomes strategic. You begin to understand that every month invested is a vote for your future. Every year you stay consistent compounds not just your money, but your confidence and clarity. Waiting is no longer wasted time. It is productive time. This mindset changes how you experience the journey. Instead of asking how quickly you can reach the next milestone, you ask how stable you can make the process. Instead of reacting to short-term noise, you focus on long-term direction. And this is where most people finally separate. Not at the start, not at the finish, but in the middle, where nothing dramatic happens and discipline must be internal. If you can accept that wealth is built quietly, slowly, and predictably, the pressure disappears. You stop forcing outcomes and start trusting systems. Because once the process is solid, speed becomes irrelevant. Time will do the rest. Reaching your first $20,000 will not change your lifestyle overnight, but it will change something far more important: your belief in what is possible. It proves that wealth is not luck, it is not talent. It is a process that rewards those who stay consistent long enough to let time do its work. Once you understand this, quitting no longer feels logical. You are no longer guessing, you are building. If this video helped you see money differently, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find content like this. And comment below, how close are you to your first $20,000? Because the decisions you make today are quietly shaping the life you will live tomorrow.